here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Rob Miller, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. He was the co-founder of the Chicago record label Bloodshot Records, which ran from the early 90s until a few years ago. But, and this is the big but, he has just written and published a new book that has just come out, titled The Hours Are Long But the Pay Is Low, A Curious Life in Independent Music. I have got a link to the how to find or buy the book in the notes below, and you'll find out more about that and also Rob's journey in music in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Rob, it's over to you.
Seeing the Talking Heads on Saturday Night Live, and then very quickly after that, Devo and the Specials and the Jam and the B-52s, things like that. Because this was a time when I was too young to go to shows or too scared to go to shows. And you didn't see bands on TV very often. So Saturday Night Live and this other show, Fridays, it's contemporary, were the ways to see live music. And before that, everything that I had seen on TV before would just kind of bored me to tears, you know, the Eddie Moneys of the world or Jethro Tull or things like that and I would just watch them on TV, and then the next Monday we'd be in school and everyone would talk about how great Fleetwood Mac was, and I would be like, oh, I don't get it. And I would just listen to my Monty Python records instead.
Yes.
And then I saw the Talking Heads. I was like, oh, this I like.
Yes, I noticed you mentioned Monty Python and also Richard Pryor as well. So was that another one of your kind of go-to artists at that time?
Yeah, I would go to our local library and check out George Carlin records and Rodney Dangerfield and Bob Newhart and Monty Python and just all these comedy records, because at that point, music was not speaking to me in any way whatsoever. I thought there was something really wrong with me. I kept trying to like it, but then I would just hear these turgid Pink Floyd songs that just seemed to go on forever. And I was just like, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm just going to go back to, Dead Parrot.
Yes, well, absolutely. I do remember when in the UK we had Channel 4, this fourth station that started on TV. We only had 3 stations to about the early 80s. And I remember Channel 4 had some risque kind of bits and pieces, and one of them was a Richard Pryor live on Sunset Strip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, and that was when we just got video recorders, either Betamax or VHS. Very exciting with those periods, weren't they? Which one were you going to pick?
So a lot of my friends would be listening to, they would be able to watch late at night this other thing called Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, or like Wolfman Jack. So there were a couple of late night things where they would show Black Sabbath or Lynyrd Skynyrd or all these other terrible things. But I would be watching the public TV stations where they would run The Adventures of Reginald Perrin and Benny Hill.
My God.
Reggie Perrin blew my mind. I love that. I couldn't wait for that every week. Which, if you're trying to be popular in middle school, being able to recite Reggie Perrin lines is not a way to become popular.
No, you're in a sort of cul-de-sac of loneliness there, weren't you? Really? But,
wow, yes. I might have to use that someday.
well, I can remember. But Reggie Perrin The Fall and Rise was quite popular, so I do remember it very well. And I used to love CJ. Hello, CJ. Great, super. It was just brilliant. It was just absolutely fantastic. And Joan, his secretary, and always visualizing the hippo.
The hippo, exactly. Oh, I was too young. I didn't even know what a mother-in-law was. But That was hilarious every time to see the hippo running across the screen.
Yes, Sunny Delight, and there was always a sort of one of the letters had collapsed or fallen off. I know, and I don't know if you ever did it, but I was just as a bit of a sideline. But well, I was a bit confused at that age of 10 when you'd watch those programs like Fall and Rise, and you see an actor in one thing, and then he would appear in another thing like Rise and Damp, and it was like it was just too much for my brain to think. Yeah, but that's Reggie Perrin. He can't possibly be Rigsby in Rise and Damp, but. Years later, I got the DVD box set and watched it.
It was hard for me to, for any number of reasons, it was hard for me to take Kubrick's Barry Lyndon seriously. But then it all fell apart when there was Reggie Perrin trying to, play a simpering nobleman from the 1800s or whatever. It was very, very disassociative to me.
Yes. And actually, I don't know if you ever sort of looked at some of his other stuff that he did, which was just absolutely stunning. I mean, he just had a way with him. Anyway, it was fantastic.
Well, that goes to my point of of what my childhood musical awakening was, is I could recite you, infinitely more Reggie Perrin lines than I could name you any song off of Led Zeppelin 4 or whatever.
So how old were you then when you got to that age of like 78? Well, in 1978, 79, when that punk period started to emerge?
Well, I was coming to it a little bit later, so I was about 15 in 1980, and that's when I would start to see this stuff on TV
Right.
and think, well, this seems really, really interesting. I can relate to this. And then when I would go to school and say, wow, this was really, I really like this. How about this band that was on last weekend? And people would be like, oh, it's punk rock. It's garbage. It's, and that kind of made me even more confused and kind of alienated, because I was like, wait, I thought we were just trying to like music. Like, what is punk rock? Well, I thought music is music. I found something I liked. Let's talk about it. And I just, people did not have any time for that kind of stuff.
Right. My God, that's quite brutal. Then that's so when you got to 16, which was probably 1981. God, I'm doing the maths here, aren't I? Did you leave school at that stage, or did you keep on at college or university?
Yeah, I graduated high school, and then I don't remember how the system works over there, but yeah, I was 18 when I graduated, and then took some time off, and then went to university after that. Yeah.
Right. And then were you then sort of ensconced in that kind of the post-punk, then the indie world of the 80s at this stage?
Yeah, by that time I was fully, once I started listening to that stuff, and I realized there was this whole other world out there that kind of popular culture was not presenting to me, either on the radio or like independent bookstores or shows. There's all these clubs around. There's all these weird record stores happening. I totally turned my back on all this stuff that I didn't like. I realized I didn't have to pay attention to it. It wasn't the only option. So from that point on, it was just, I was a musical sponge. I was just soaking it all in from everywhere, going to see Peter Tosh, and, Jimmy Cliff was huge. I went and saw Harder They Come at a second run movie theater, and just was blown away by reggae. I was like, what is this reggae stuff? And so it was, from that point on, it was just a rocket sled of fandom in anything that I heard that I liked, because I didn't feel like I had to any longer justify liking or disliking anything. I could go on my own path.
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, I was quite lucky in the sense, but it's funny because I had a brother who was 7 years older than me. And at that stage, he was very into his musical moment, I suppose, was the mid-70s. And he was into prog rock in a big way, including, yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James, and Jethro Tull. And I was 10, and I would sneak into his room and play these records. I was quite fascinated with them. So I then sort of quite enjoyed them for a while, and then got into the 80s and realised that, was like, God, why didn't he have better music taste? You know, it was a bit annoyed with him because, you know, because punk was just like, was not, you know, there was no 7-inch singles in that record collection. It was just, in, you know, very pompous, pretentious kind of gatefold
Right.
sleeves by Roger
That
D.
was that Tales of the Topographic Ocean or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. You know, Rick Wakeman's solo work, all the lot. But he did have sort of Deep Purple and Black Sabbath thrown in there with a few other bits. But generally, it was just serious prog, you know. And yeah, and then the 80s appeared, and then I started to think, yeah, actually, I can't, you know, you have that moment, don't you? And then I suppose John Peel was the DJ that we loved here. Well, some of us a bit, but it was also one of those things that didn't make me very good in conversation because not many people were that curious about the John Peel show. So again, you know, you're in a party going, oh my God, I've just heard this, this, and this. And it was like this tumbleweed of like,
Well, then that's when you realize you're at the wrong party.
you're at the wrong party, you know, but you feel like you know, you don't know who are the people who are listening to John Peel. And then,
Well, they're out there. And that's, you know, that's a part of the book is that I think all of us who love music as something really instrumental to our lives, we all have that radio show that we found or that DJ that we found. Mine was Radios in Motion in Detroit, and the DJ was Michael Halloran, and his playlists would turn into shopping lists at the record stores the next week. You would just go down the list and be like, I want to buy as much of this stuff as I possibly can afford. And there was another guy who was on the other side of the dial called the Electrifying Mojo, and that was on a black-owned station, and that's where I first heard like Radio Clash or the Prince, or not the Prince, and and Parliament Funkadelic and things like that. And they would just he would play P-Funk next to Devo and not really make a big deal out of it because the U.S. the radio stations, you know. There was quite the apartheid going on the radio stations. There were black stations and there were white stations, and this guy didn't care, and I didn't care because I didn't really know what was going on. So I would just listen to this guy's show late at night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and just soak it all in. It was just incredible, and I think everyone who loves music has that experience somehow. Like they connect through a radio station or through a great record store or something like that.
yes, well, absolutely. I mean, you know, I always, I never listened to John Peel live. I'd always put my trusty TDK D90 cassette in to listen to it. And then, because the time of the show wasn't great for me, but also I needed to listen to it a few times because when it's all music new for the first time, it was just too much to sort of take in.
And at that time, if you didn't hear it, you missed it.
You missed it, I know.
You know, it was gone. It was there, and then it wasn't. So yeah, I taped a lot of radio shows too because, you know, there was no archive to go back and listen to online. Yeah, it was there, and then it wasn't.
It was, yeah, and then he would mumble sometimes a record, and I'd be, what does he say? And then you'd go into a record shop and go, have you got this record? And they'd look at you and go, have no idea what you're talking about. But, you know, it was kind of interesting and curiosity. But the thing with John Peel was that he did just play everything, that he curated this show, which he obviously is very rare. No one does it now. But, you know, he played an indie song, he'd play a reggae song, an African song, a jazz, you know, but, you know, it was predominantly, I suppose, indie rock.
He played a few of our artists over the years too, yeah.
Oh God, yes, and that was such a relief because I felt like I had a bit of a limited attention span, and you know, it's like after a while you think I've had enough. You know, indie pop was probably my go-to thing, but even I can just think I would like to hear something slightly different now. So reggae was something that he introduced me to with people like Dennis Brown and Gregory Isaacs, and then Sly and Robbie and all those kind of artists. And then, you know, you had the British reggae bands like Aswad and Misty Roots and Burning Spear. And you thought, wow, this is great. And those concerts we went to were just awesome because they were just such brilliant vibes, you know, man. So, yes, that was all groovy. So did you also then get into different, you know, during the 80s, did you get into that indie scene in the UK? Like that we had people like the Smiths and the Primitives and the Darling Buds and the Mighty Lemon Drops and all those bands, or what was your post-punk and post-punk period like?
Well, I really dove headfirst into hardcore for a while, like Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, Circle Jerks, And then from there, I started finding bands like the Cramps and the Gun Club and Jason and the Scorchers. And funny story, recently I've just started really getting into the Jam. Like somehow I miss them. And they're brilliant. Oh my God, how did I miss them? But yeah, I like the Primitives, but yeah, it was nothing that really spoke to the immediacy of my environs. You know, those were kind of pop groups to me when I was listening to that more harder edge stuff that, you know, it kind of burned brightly and then burned out, and I stopped being interested, and that's when I started finding roots music.
Right. So did you find Screaming Jay Hawkins and think, God, this
Oh
is...
yeah, yeah, and going way back, yeah, finding things like that through bands like Barrence Whitfield and the Savages, or the Cramps. Like I would look at the songwriting credits on their albums and be like, well, who's that? And then I heard Little Richard for the first time, and that I just couldn't. I mean, that was punk 20 years before punk was punk. You know, there was some crazy stuff going on, and by digging backwards, I realized that these strange, marginalized oddballs and misfits had always existed. It wasn't just a punk thing. That in American musical history, these kinds of people had always existed, and we had just kind of conveniently shoved them aside and didn't pay attention to them, so that oldies would be represented by, like, you know, Rock Around the Clock or Peggy Sue, or, you know, these really kind of simple, easily digestible, nostalgic tunes. Whereas there was this whole underground of weirdness that has happened for decades, if not centuries, in this country, and digging into that was just became an obsession. And so the
Yes.
first time I saw Barrence Whitfield, I mean, I couldn't believe it. Like, here was this guy that, I mean, that they're a punk band, you know, but they were doing like songs that were at that point 30, 40 years old. And so I had to find those original versions and imagine just how weird those things were back then, because they're still pretty weird now.
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, yes, I think there was various films that came out as well, which kind of introduced us to people like, I don't know, people with referencing certain artists were very good. I mean, David Bowie was obviously very good at sort of mentioning books and films and artists that you thought, oh my God, now I've got to go and discover that. But I seem to remember, I don't know if he appeared in a film or there was a Jim Jarmusch movie that
Yeah,
came
Jim
out,
Jarmusch,
Down by Law.
Strangers in Paradise.
Yes, strange.
And the woman was obsessed with Screaming Jay Hawkins, and that played really well in the art theaters here, and so that kind of, yeah, brought him out of retirement, or brought him out of complete obscurity. I got to see him a couple of times, and yeah, it was incredible, and what a maniac! And you're thinking, this guy is he was making music in the 50s. I mean, it was just mad. It was crazy stuff.
Yes, and I think there was, oh yes, Brand New Cadillac as well. But Vince somebody, wasn't it? From
Oh yeah, yeah.
that classic, the Clash. And again, you know, you're thinking, I mean, some of these artists were one-hit wonders, but my God, they were great one-hit wonders,
And
weren't they?
one, yeah. Think of one hit wonders now. Are we going to be unearthing them 50 years from now and going, wow, this is spectacular, or how demented and deranged and amazing? I don't think so. I mean, there's so many, you know, when you start digging around the backyard of American music, it gets pretty weird pretty quick, and
Yes.
it's completely fascinating.
So as the 80s progressed then, did you get into bands like Sonic Youth and Husker Du and the Butthole Surfers at this stage?
You know, I was aware of them. I saw them all. I worked with some of them when I was a production manager. Um, but yeah, by that time I was already kind of moving away from hardcore and that more like indie, like super indie underground stuff, and finding, and by that time I was finding Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and Patsy
Right.
Cline, and listening and moving on to that, because at that point, you know, by this time I'm in my mid 20s. All that hardcore stuff was so like, let's roll over police cars and smash the state, and uh, things like that. And I was like, you know, I'm getting too old to be rolling over police cars, and but then I would find something like Hank Williams, and there would be that immediacy between the audience and the songwriter and the performer, and an energy and a purity to it that reminded me of what I heard in those Sex Pistols records or in those Clash records, like something just very elemental to them. And so I just started listening to that. I kind of turned my back on a lot of the, like, grunge was starting to get really big here, and I just kind of let that wash by me because I felt like I was done with it, and there was just so much other stuff that I was finding. And then I would be finding these punk bands that were also getting tired of it, and
Yeah.
and introducing like elements of country music or roots or blues into their sound. And that to me was a fascinating combination, and that's what eventually led to the label.
Yes. Did you, just on that point, did people like Elvis Costello, when they did their country album, did that kind of spark an interest in what he must have been listening to and who he was covering?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you would think, because so much of the punk vibe was like all history is bunk. There's why look back. It's failed. Let's move forward. Nostalgia is wrong, and our predecessors taught us nothing. And then you hear something like Almost Blue, or when members of X and the Blasters did a side project called the Knitters. You realize that there was all this amazing music back then that had been forgotten, and why should we forget it? Why not incorporate it into what we're doing now? Bring those thematic tropes into kind of the energy of punk rock, and then you come up with something completely different.
Yes. Before
But
the
I
label.
remember when Almost Blue came out, I was working at a college radio station and helping to review records, and people just hated that record. They're like, "What is this?" And I was like, people were like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" They was like, "Wow, what's going on here?"
Yes. Well, I had a boss during the 80s who was much older than me, and he had been part of that 60s world. But then he loved Elvis Costello, and when he got that album, he absolutely loved it. And I was a bit of a nerd, and well, not nerd, just a bit of a young twerp. And he sort of gave me a bit of a sort of finger wagging, and yes, told me I didn't. Yeah, probably said something quite sort of cut in to say, "Oh, you should listen to this. This is, country music is good." I think the problem was my parents or my dad liked country music, but it was like Jim Reeves and I don't know, oh God, some really, yeah. Oh, who's the guy who used to do Boxcar Willie and people like that? And there's, I'm sure they're okay, but Crystal Gale or sort of
No,
people.
they're not. No, country music at that time, especially, was completely hateable. It was completely understandable to hate what was popular country music at the time. And I did too. I like all that Kenny Rogers stuff and the Oak Ridge Boys and Ronnie Millsap, and oh my God, it was terrible. But to me, as I started digging into used record stores and coming home with all these 45s of George Jones or Johnny Paycheck or Tammy Wynette, that to say you hate country music because you hate what is on the radio right now is like saying I hate rock and roll because I hate, pick the worst band in the world, REO Speedwagon, or the Eagles. Because I hate the Eagles, I hate all rock music, and
Yes.
that's just not true. There's so much more out there than what is just being crammed down our throats on pop radio or in popular culture, that if you like peel back the curtain to what the industry wants you to like or listen to or buy, there's this whole other fascinating world.
Yes, absolutely. So then after college, university, then you didn't start the label. You had a few years of doing odd jobs, bits and pieces, reviewing records, being a stage manager as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I from my work at the radio station, a promotions company in Ann Arbor, Michigan, hired me to be a stagehand, and then I just showed an aptitude for it, and I became a stage manager, and then next thing I knew, I was the production manager, and I did that for a few years until I just got completely burnt out on it. It was a great it was a great kind of university for me because I got to learn every aspect of putting on a show and everything that goes into show business.
Yes.
And I realized, just as important as knowing what you do like in what you do, you also have to learn what you don't like. and I got a pretty good crash course on the things I didn't like about the music industry, which served me well after I started the label. Like I knew all the scams that would go on. I knew all the things that was going on behind the scenes. But yeah, I was the first man in and the last one out for these shows 3, 4, 5 times a week, and I was just burnt out. I stopped listening to music. Music just became something that was in the way while I was doing my job, you know? And so that didn't seem like a good place to be. So I quit and ran away.
Right. Then did you do odd jobs and sort of painting and decorating, or was that something, to make ends meet?
Yeah, I moved to Chicago to get away from the music business, which really didn't turn out very well for me ultimately. But yeah, I moved here because I was going to graduate school, and also if you are from the Midwest in America and you don't want to go to and you want to live in a big city, you don't go to New York, you don't go to LA, you come to Chicago. Chicago in the early 90s was like the only place in the Midwest where it still felt vibrant, and there was a sense of opportunity here that did not exist in Detroit at the time, and in a lot
Right.
of other places. So I have so many friends here who are from Michigan, but there's also, I know so many people from Milwaukee and St. Louis and Iowa and Kentucky. Chicago was a bit of a magnet in the
Yes.
early
Well,
90s, which made it such a special place because there was all these creative people who could create with a pretty low bar for entry. There were, rents were cheap here. It was easy to get around. Restaurants were, diners were everywhere. It was a very livable, inexpensive place to live and create.
yes. And did you meet up with people at that stage? I know there was a guy called Chris Conley who was from
Oh
Scotland.
yeah.
He was in various bands in the UK, who just had a compilation that now I've forgotten what it was actually. They did a single called Detestimony, which was, oh God, who was the band name? Anyway, but there was also members of the.
Was it Revolting Cox? Was it Tim
Oh, he was
or?
in, yeah, so he was in Revolting Cocks, but he was also, before all that, as a young chap in Scotland, was in another particular band that was very John Peel, and I'm just going to have to find it, aren't I, really? Chris
But yeah,
Conley.
Wax Tracks was a label that was here, and they had, I've met Martin Atkins a few times. He's here. So there's a lot of that early industrial, like, British
Yes,
stuff
he was
was
in
coming
Finny,
through here.
so it was Finny Tribe that he was in, actually, which was a Scottish combo who have just got a compilation out that he's put together. But yes, the Mekons, I think they all relocated to Chicago, didn't they?
Yeah,
All
a couple of them have. Yeah,
Sally
yeah,
and
early
John.
on. Yeah, Sally and
So
John. Yeah.
So then, as the 90s progressed, so at that stage, obviously grunge didn't sort of tickle you that much then. That.
No,
So what
too
was on
much
your
too much Black Sabbath in it for me.
what was on your musical radar? Was it roots music? Were you still sort of
Yeah, I was just completely immersed in this weird hybrid that was happening, and I was also way into a lot of the garage rock stuff that was happening on In the Red Records and Estrus Records, and some of the other Pacific Northwest bands like Girl Trouble or Norton Records in New York, the A Bones, things like that. But yeah, it was this roots stuff that was happening in town because the early 90s, Chicago was getting branded as the new Seattle, and there
right?
was there was the Smashing Pumpkins and Urge Overkill and Liz Phair and other bands like that were doing really well, and so there was this big feeding frenzy of major labels coming to town and signing bands after one or two shows, but all these other bands that were just kind of percolating around the edges of the scenes, they're kind of the underground of the underground, and they were all kind of messing around with roots music. And we saw 15, 20 bands around town that were maybe drawing 10 people each, and we thought, well, let's put this on a compilation, and we get all these 10 people, and next thing you know, you got 200 people, and we just thought that it was something that needed documenting at the time, and really didn't have any expectation of it being an ongoing concern.
Yes. Were
We
you
put it out.
were you surprised with yourself that you started a record label by mistake?
Yes, absolutely. It was completely just a lark to, maybe get some guest list spots and maybe a few free drinks, and we would press up 1,000 CDs and hopefully get rid of them. Hopefully, not be staring at them in our basement for the rest of our lives. And then, but
Yes.
very, very quickly, um, writers from around the country started contacting us. Writing, taking pen to paper and sealing them in an envelope and putting them in the post and sending them to our living room that was our office. And saying, hey, we've got these bands in town here that are kind of doing the same thing, and no one's paying attention to them here. And this was coming from Dallas and San Francisco and Phoenix and New York, the Carolinas. And so we're like, well, let's do another compilation and see what happens. And so it just kind of grew organically from that.
Yes. So on the first one, you had the Bottle Rockets, Freakwater, the Hanson family, didn't you? So yes, there was John Peel, but we also had Andy Kershaw and the Whispering Bob Harris, didn't we, in the UK? And I think that's probably helped promote your label quite quickly.
Oh, yeah. And we also, Chicago was a place where there were a lot of venues in every neighborhood. Every neighborhood had a little stage, 100, 200 people, and the club owned, and there were 3 or 4 radio stations that would cover this stuff, and some independent newspapers that jumped right on board. So it was a very unique time that there was all this media that was willing to take a chance on this stuff. I mean, the club owners were like, you have absolutely no sales history, you have no catalog, there's absolutely no reason we should let your bands be on our stage, so come on in. And it was great.
Yes, I could imagine. So once you did your first compilation, did you sell your 1,000 copies quite quickly?
Yeah, surprisingly, yeah.
And was because I've also, as a fan, especially in the 80s period, when John Peel played anything from America, there was always this kind of like, God, I'm going to like that band regardless because they're from America and they're obscure, and that for me or ticks several boxes, and you just want to like it. Did you find that you got an audience quite quickly overseas with the label? Because people, I don't know what it's like now, but at that time, I just remember the excitement of discovering something that no one else had got.
It's hard to say because what we were doing was so peculiar to even American ears, like rethinking American roots music, that there's an added layer of complexity to it by taking it overseas. So you'd have to kind of almost like it on its own merit without knowing the kind of context of how it's being turned on its head a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
England was difficult for a lot of our bands that were kind of pushing the envelope in terms of how they were reinterpreting this stuff. A lot of the more traditionally minded bands did better, and in mainland Europe as well. Like we did quite well in Scandinavia with things that were kind of more overtly country. There would still be subversive either in some of the instrumentation or the subject matter or the energy level, but it was still like very recognizably roots music, and they liked that. And Netherlands and Belgium and Spain and Portugal like the more like obnoxious garagey stuff, but then there were other territories countries that they just didn't get it.
Yes, I know. Well, it's always interesting because I know some kind of English British bands who just they're still going now from the 80s that have had sort of gaps in
And
there.
the bands that did well in the UK would be more in the singer-songwriter vein, like some of the more hard-edged, like we're going to take country music and really throw a shot of adrenaline punk rock into it. That never really did well for us there. They liked the songwriter vibe more.
Yes, I do remember sort of, and like I said, that age group where, one's no longer 16 and you're getting a bit older and you're looking for something slightly different. But the 90s, I do remember there was people like, I suppose there was Kim Ritchie, Sean Colvin, there
Oh
was
yeah, yeah.
those kind of artists,
Yeah, they would
Stacey.
always, and those were always a little too mainstream for us, but yeah, they always did really well there.
But I did notice that they became that part of people's kind of record collection. Started to sort of want to listen to something a bit more traditional, or some that had that basis. There was Alison Krauss as well, wasn't there?
Hmm.
She started to appear, and then there was like, is it Uncle Tupelo?
Tupelo, yeah.
Tupelo, yes.
Tupelo.
I don't know if that was the 90s, but there was people like that and Wilco. But again, it was all, and Steve Earle and Lucinda Williams and Victoria Williams,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
those people. And I do remember there was an artist that I loved in the late 80s called Mary Margaret O'Hara, who I thought was going to be
Hmm.
huge. She did one album, never. I was the kiss of death to most artists, I think, really. The more I went on about it, the more likely they'd disappear and never be seen again. I had that touch. So yes. So then,
You
when
might you might not want to put that on your resume. You might
no, I
not
know.
when you pitch this to when you pitch your show to bands, you might not want to mention that.
Yes, this is true. Actually, yes. By the way, I will think you're brilliant, but you will disappear from the public consciousness. I know. I know. Yeah. So when you set it up, though, was it you and a couple of mates as well? Was this your?
Yeah,
There was three of you that did it. So
at the beginning, yeah.
how were you able to hustle a sort of a living at this stage with this kind of dynamic?
Oh, it wasn't a living. I didn't quit. I didn't put down my house painting brush for 4 or 5 years. We all had day jobs, so this would be something we would do when we got home at night.
Right.
I would be painting a tenant's bathroom, till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, come home and then just write press releases and mail them out, and or go to shows and just network. So yeah, it was far from a living for a long time.
Yes, that was amazing. And what was the first release that you did, which wasn't a compilation?
It was by a local band called Moonshine Willie. That was yeah, kind of like a hopped up, elements of bluegrass, rockabilly, and with like they had grown up in the punk rock scene.
Right, there you go. So Charlie Pickett. So
Oh yes,
he was one
he
of
was
those.
one that I discovered in college that just, oh my God, loved Charlie Pickett. I just
And
got an email from him a couple weeks ago, actually.
yes, because I do remember, and I think it was his album in the 80s that I think Kershaw played, and I probably went and bought, which was Route 33. So that was one of those ones. And there was also like the Old Grey Whistle Test. That was, I'm not sure
Hmm.
when that was still going, but Jason and the Scorchers was
Yeah,
appearing. And there was kind of an excitement about, that. Sometimes there
yeah.
was too many men with check shirts, but I mean, we have to sort of cope with fashion, don't we? I know it's easily done. I always wear.
It's cold
I'm.
here. It's cold
It,
here. It's
I
flannel.
know.
I'm warm. But yeah,
Yes.
Jason and the Scorchers was, they came to Detroit the first time and played a punk club where I had seen, the Cramps, Nick Cave, Dinosaur Jr., Pearl, and they came into this punk club and just blew the doors off the place, and I went home and did everything I could to find everything they ever recorded, and that was the first, their version of Lost Highway, the Hank Williams song. I didn't know it was a cover for a long time. I just thought, well, here's a brilliant song, and then I was like, oh, this is Hank Williams. Okay, maybe I should start paying attention to Hank Williams. So, and Charlie Pickett, oh my God, like that, he did an EP on a little Florida label before Route 33, which was on Twin Tone out of
Right.
Minneapolis, who also did the Replacements and Soul Asylum and bands like that. But his first EP was called Cowboy Junkie A Go Go, which I saw in a record store in college, and then immediately fell in love with it. And he happened to be coming through town, and I got to see him play. And that to me was that's one of those handful of bands that really encapsulate what I wanted the label to be, this raw punk rock energy, but with classic country songwriting almost.
Yes, well, absolutely. And at that point, and I don't know if you ever watched it, but there was the film Woodstock '99, and it was kind of an interesting one. Obviously, I wasn't there, but music during the '90s, there were so many different parallel things going on at that stage because you obviously had all these metal rap bands going full tilt, weren't you? Massive amounts of record sales and drugs and suicides and death and stuff like that. And then you were sort of running another sort of altered reality, really, weren't you? Did it feel quite interesting at that point, being in the record industry with such different sort of diversity going on?
I can honestly say I didn't give a moment's thought to any of that stuff. Like it seemed like it was the worst elements of metal with the worst elements of rap
Yeah.
played by the same kind of people that were beating me up in high school, but they just happened to be wearing backwards baseball caps and had obnoxious tattoos. And it was just way too aggro and dim-witted for me. And so yeah, we were in the music industry, but hardly, we were just kind of underground. We were just kind of scooting around under most people's radar, building our own fan base and building our own scene kind of slowly and organically without really worrying about what the next big thing is going to be and not having to succumb to that pressure of gotta find a hit, like
Yes.
those things come and go, and we just wanted to have a nice sustainable label where people could put out records and sell several thousand and make enough to put out another one and tour every once in a while. There was no attempt by anyone, either most of the artists or us, to become this giant thing.
Yeah, so that period, the first part, say the mid to the late '90s, what artist particularly captured a moment that you thought, God, this one's been a bit of a winner compared to just a steady sell? But was there any particular peaks that sort of raised your sort of excitement?
On our label.
Yes, your label.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first old 97s record, Wreck Your Life, was our first kind of hit. Uh, and then there was Robbie Fulks and Neko Case. And then we started working with Alejandro Escovedo as well, who is Rank and File and True Believers, and a legend. I mean, I had several of his records in my collection already, and then he came to us and said, "Hey, could you put out? No one else will have me. Will you put out my records?" And I thought, wow, the music industry is really fucked if Alejandro Escovedo can't find a place and he's coming to us. Yes, I will happily put out your music. And so we had a good run of records by those people, and all of a sudden people were looking to us as some sort of arbiter
Savior.
of, not savior, but like maybe I don't know if the term will translate over there, but a farm team, like a minor league, whatever the lower level of soccer, football is over there, like
Right.
before you get to the Premier League, you know
Yes, it's
we were somebody to look at, like, oh, they signed somebody, let's pay attention to them, and if they start to do well, we'll try and buy them out, that kind of thing. So
Yes, but then as a fan, I was always there would when you realise a label was being curated by a person who just loved that music before they burnt out or sold it all off, or just
yeah, absolutely, and those were the kind of labels that I paid attention to as a kid, and I tried in the book to run that through line from my experience with labels like SST and Discord and Stiff, that they did have distinctive personalities to them, that I wanted our label to have that as well, so that people
yes,
could, even if they hadn't heard of the artist, they would see our logo and go, I'll give that a try because I know them, and it was a very community based vibe to it, like,
yes. Well, I think that always helps because then you sort of trust
yeah, you
the
feel like you feel like you're in it together, you feel like you're a part of the process,
yes,
like I always felt, a kinship with some of these older labels, and people would always, come up to me at clubs or at South by Southwest or something and be like, if I see your name on it, I'll pick it up. And
yes.
That, there's few things more flattering from a label owner's perspective than that, just to earn that trust of a fan base.
Had you sort of learnt from your early years how the industry worked? Because it's one of the great mysteries, isn't it? Like publishing, ownership of music, the whole money, the finance, the legality of it. Was that something that you'd already got a very good idea of it and then had to, sharpen some skills up as you sort of started having legal documents that you realised were quite important?
Yeah, I mean, again, working as a production manager, stage manager, being a tour manager, going on the road with bands, you learned the way certain aspects of the industry worked, and you also learned what parts of it you found to be morally depraved, morally bankrupt. Yes, exactly. And I learned the way I didn't want to run the label. If I knew how the music industry worked, this would be a much nicer, bigger room on an island somewhere,
With gold discs.
So I didn't necessarily know how it worked, but I knew what felt right. And I also knew that from my exposure to those early punk labels and stuff, that I didn't have to conform to some kind of industry expectations. I could take things that worked, things that felt good, things that felt organic, and hold on to those and push other things aside, and not do it the way other people wanted us to do it. That there was a whole spectrum of ways to do this.
Yes. And what was that relationship like with South by Southwest? Was that harmonious?
Oh, it was. Well, it also speaks to the nature. It goes back to the point I was just talking about. Early on, they wouldn't take our bands.
Yes, I remember that in the book.
We don't have, we didn't have a track record, or they didn't find them interesting or something. So we said, fine, don't take us. We'll put on a day party. In the crappy part of town where no one from the festival usually goes, and that became the longest running day party at South by, and it just grew bigger and bigger every year, and we stayed in the same place, and we just had to buy more beer, and it would be packed out by noon. By the time we opened the doors, it would just be packed, and it was packed all day, and so yeah, South by was great.
Yes.
It spoke to that community aspect to it, because there would be a lot of industry goons who were down there to find the next thing that was going to make them rich. And every year, those people would change. They'd go in and out and disappear, or things would blow up or whatever. And there we were year after year. And people knew that they could come to our show and just enjoy the community of music. There wasn't like an angle to it. Yeah, we had new bands that we were promoting, but there wasn't like hey, this is a flash in the pan thing. This is a get rich quick scheme, like come out for the day and hang out and drink some beer. And,
yes.
and it'll be great. And over the years, it worked,
Amazing. And so when Ryan Adams came onto the scene, how did you discover that particular singer-songwriter?
He was a big, when he was like 19, he was a big fan when he was in Whiskey Town, and he would just call the office and just say, can I record with you? Can I make some singles? Can we get Whiskey Town to do some singles? And we'd be like, sure. I mean, he was, I knew the other guys in the band, and they were, they were sincere kids who were just like, they were in the process of discovering all this music too. So they were fans of our early records, and they, they were young. They were just figuring it out too, and they just wanted to like bang it out. But they had all these people in the industry like glomming onto them, thinking they were going to be the next. They were going to be the like the Americana version of Nirvana,
Right.
like all these old industry goons were surrounding them, like promising them magic beans and gold bars and stuff, and I felt bad for them all, because they were just getting this pressure to be this thing that maybe they could never be, or maybe they didn't want to be. But there was a lot of major label stuff, and so they would just do singles for us for fun.
Right.
And they'd be like, and they were fun to do. And then when Whiskey Town broke up, he came to us and said, hey, I've got this album. And we said, sure, and it was lightning in a bottle. It just blew up. It became huge. But in retrospect, you think, well, obviously it was going to, because it was a great record. But at the time, it was like, no, they were kind of an unknown band, and he was a volatile personality, and it wasn't a foregone conclusion that this was even going to make its money back. We initially hoped in discussions with our distributor that we would sell 7,000 to 10,000.
Right. And how many?
And it went on to sell 400. By the time our license expired with our record 15 years ago. So in the 10 years we had it, it sold 400,000 or something, which was just insane.
Blimey, that is amazing. There was a lot of excitement. I remember getting the album after that, Gold, as well, and thinking, God, this is great. I've discovered another artist. And then you realise you're not the only one. But this
Right.
that was Ethan Johns produced that album, didn't he?
Yeah.
My God. So were you part of that process of him, who he was going to record with and where?
Nope.
Right. So he just handed you the album.
Yep. And that happened sometime. And that I go a little bit into that in the book, that, that was just part of being an independent label. Like there was no one way to do anything, that you had to customize your approach to every artist. Some people wanted me in the studio the whole time to help record or help, I produced a lot of our early records, or they just wanted me to mix it or help master it or sequence it. Or others would just be like, here. Graham Parker was one. We eventually got to work with Graham Parker, which, as a music fan is a huge thrill. But, I'm not a songwriter. How would I dare presume to tell Graham Parker what to do with his albums? He's, so he would just walk in and go, here. And I'd be like, thank you. And I would get on it on my end,
Right. Was he working at the time with Brinsley Schwartz, or was that when he was in a different combo?
Yeah, he was kind of in between things. He was kind of lost, like no one really knew what to do with him. And one of the drummer in the Waco Brothers was in the Rumor, Steve Goulding.
Right.
So he told Graham about us, and next thing you know, we did 4 albums with him, and what a thrill, for a music geek like me, like what a thrill.
Yes, God, that's amazing. Yes, it's amazing. Brinsley's just done another album, actually. I think he's
and he did a few tours with Brinsley through Chicago, and it was like what a great bunch of guys to hang out with.
Yes, because when I did an interview with Miles Copeland, he was just talking about when he had the Police, he went to A&M Records, and it was like, look, we've done the album, you don't have to pay anything, but you put it out, probably cut a good deal. So it was almost like a no-brainer of them just going, okay, we'll do it, because I was going to say there was not. They didn't have to go. Oh, I need to see the accountant. It's like you don't have to do any of that. We've done the work. This is the album.
Yeah, there's no one way to do it. And if you just sit there and go, well, this sounds like a great proposal, let's formalize it, and then we need to go to our A&R department, and then we need to talk to the accountants, and then kick it up to the executive VP, and then get a thumbs up. That kills so many projects. And we were small enough and nimble enough that if somebody like Graham Parker walks into the office and says, put out my record, we can go, okay, let's do that, and not get bogged down in the stupid shit that just makes people crazy.
And how did you get?
I forgot to ask if it's okay if I swear.
No, that's fine. So how did you then navigate the O years? Because obviously you start brilliantly with Ryan Adams and sort of a little bit of financial security, I guess, and sort of ability to be full time and employ more staff. But then the music industry has this kind of massive kind of moment, doesn't it, which kind of shakes everything after years of not complacency, but thinking this is marvelous.
Complacency and greed. Yeah, like with all the major labels charging $18.98 for a CD, like they just took advantage of how there was no other game in town. LPs had gone away. There was the digital technology wasn't there yet. So it was like, well, you want this tub thumping song? Well, then you got to pay $18.98 for the whole CD. You're shit out of luck. And that just created the perfect environment for when Napster or these digital trading services came along, for the customers to feel like they've been treated like suckers, and so they just abandoned it. How we survived it was back to that idea of community, that all we could do, the genie was out of the bottle. It's not like you were going to outlaw digital downloads or streaming services. The only thing we could do was educate our fan base and say, if you don't buy this record from this guy, from this artist, they may not be able to come back. It's as simple as that. We're not talking about Don Henley wanting to buy another island.
No.
It's these people, like, you are taking money out of their gas tanks. They're not trying to get rich. They just want to tour for a couple weeks a year, a couple months a year, bring these albums out and just make enough money to make it worthwhile to do another one. And more often than not, our fan base would understand that. They would understand the economics of that, and they stayed loyal. They would still buy physical product. It's just when things get bigger, if an artist tries to go bigger, then you're dealing with fans that have no history with you. They have no loyalty to you, and they're just like, something for free sounds good to me. And they don't really think about the ramifications of it. But as we see now, 20 years down the line, with ticket prices to shows being exponentially more than they used to be, there's no such thing as a free download. Like, that money has to be made up somewhere. Like,
right.
if you're an artist on the road and you're not selling anything because everyone's downloading it, well, then you got to triple your show price. And then that just feeds the circle of the fan going, well, I just paid £100 to see this band. Well, why do I need to buy their album? And then it just cycles on itself.
Yes, I know. It's a little bit tricky, that one, isn't it? I know it's a bit of a shock when you think, I mean, during lockdown, people were starting to go through their archives and attics, putting up their posters of gigs in the 80s where you see 3 bands for $250 or something ridiculous. And you're thinking, gosh, it has gone up a lot, hasn't it, really? But never mind, that's life. So a couple of artists that I'd be curious in. Dambert No Bacon. You mentioned Tub Thumping there, didn't you? So Dambert from Chumbawamba, did you put out an album by him then at that during your sort of period?
We did, yeah. He was friends with John Langford of the Mekons, and he just Chumbawamba had gotten too big to keep going or whatever, and he just had he had all these songs, and John wanted to back him up, and that was we always had the flexibility to do strange little projects like that. I was never scared away from doing them, and there was never any we did them in a way that there wasn't a tremendous financial pressure to make them succeed, to jam a square peg into a round hole. Like,
yes.
We could do that. We could do it affordably, and it would sell what it would sell, and it would break even.
God, that's perfect then. Yes, no, it's just one of those, because my partner once lived in a squat in Leeds during the 80s and knew Chumbawamba, and we have a cassette that he did. Cassettes were quite popular in those days, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And when I saw that he'd been on your label and did a release, I thought, oh my God, that's on. But I sort of vaguely knew he did some solo stuff. But yes, there you go. It was
just a little one-off thing that he didn't tour behind it. He did a few festival dates, so he played South by one year. But yeah, it was just something that projects like that, and we would do a lot of compilations, like thematic compilations or one-off collaborations between artists that weren't going to break any sales records. But in the days before streaming became so prevalent, you could get away with those. You could put it out, it would sell a few thousand, and they were fun. And to me, some of them are really interesting. Different, you're able to present a different side of an artist in a way that they might not normally do on their own album, and they made some money. you know?
Yes. Well,
And I think though those kinds of projects are the things that started to suffer the most, the quickest for us. Like we had to stop doing those as frequently because without any kind of touring and with everyone streaming everything, that they just became it became unfeasible to keep doing them.
Yes. And then I remember a few years ago, probably more now, listened to an amazing interview with, was it Justin Townes Earle, which was quite amazing because I think he dies quite soon after a particular interview where he was saying that it was all going terribly well, and you think, oh dear, that wasn't. So I mean, working with him, what was that relationship like?
It was, he was an immensely talented person. I met him when he was pretty young. He stayed at my house. He came to town to play a house concert, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, can this guy stay in your basement for a couple of days?" And said it was Justin. I was like, "Yeah, sure." I know his name. I know he's the son of someone famous, but who cares? In a
Yes.
lot of ways, who cares? I mean, just because your dad could write a song doesn't mean you can write a song. Just, like I don't have many Frank Sinatra Jr. records in my collection, if you know what I mean.
No, not at all.
And so he played this house concert a couple of towns up from here, and I went to it without any expectations. I just thought, it's a Tuesday night or whatever, a Wednesday night, and why not? And within this, halfway through the second song, I knew that I wanted to work with the guy. He was just tremendous. He just captured I don't want to say a stage. It was like the corner of a living room, but he was just so intense, and it was just incredible. And I thought, this guy is going to do something, and not even I don't know what that is. I don't know if it'll be popular, but I found it completely compelling. And the next day, we were talking about it. I was like, yeah, if you ever want to do some records, let's do them. And he was thrilled at the idea of not having to do it in Nashville and not have the pressure of being his dad's son.
Yes.
He could come up he could come up here to Chicago and do whatever to find his own voice. And we did 4 records with him, and I could hear growth in his writing and the growth of his performing was incredible. Like his shows were just always riveting to me, and the albums just kept growing and growing and growing. And then at Harlem River Blues, his fourth, if you count an EP, but his third full length, like it just seemed fully formed. But it took 5-6 years to get there, and with a bigger label, you might not have that time to develop,
Yes.
to grow, to find your voice. And when he did find his voice, it was just incredible, and it was just a thrill. And then immediately afterwards, he had to go into rehab, and it was just really tough, and then I would see him. He went to another label. He fulfilled his contract with us, and he wanted to go big. He wanted to live on a tour bus, and it's like, that's not what we do. So we just amicably parted ways, and we just kept supporting him any way we could. He kept doing compilation tracks for us. We did a couple more singles with him, and then it just ended terribly, way too soon. It was like,
Yes.
I was really, it was during COVID, and I was hearing from so many artists that were separated from their fans, like everyone was isolated, and a couple other artists of ours died in this isolation, and then it was just like, I was pissed because, in the American sense,
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I got you.
that I, as a fan, I was robbed of wherever his music was going to take him, but also just like, I knew that he was suffering as a person, but
Yes.
it was an incredible piece of luck for both of us, and it was things like that being open to weird scenarios like that helped us find people like Justin at a time when we maybe needed something to sell really well.
Yes.
So that did really well, and that kept us going for a few years. Then you would find these things. I would never look out there and go, I need to find something that's going to do really well, because that seems like a fool's errand on the one hand, but also dishonest for both parties. Like if you look at someone and go, "You're going to be popular. I want to sign you." That's not. And things got. There was always ebbs and flows with us, and we never. When times were good, we didn't go out and buy like, a Rolls Royce or anything. We just, I live very simply. I knew that there was not going to be a pension involved here, or that the whole thing could just blow up and go away at any time. So I would just live simply. And then we would find somebody like Lydia Lovelace or Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, somebody like that would do really well, and it would like keep everything going, But it was
Yes.
it was always an organic process. It wasn't like, let's find the next million seller.
Yes, absolutely. And then you mentioned towards the end of your book, this March 2020. I mean, what was this kind of like, as we sort of ended one decade and started another? What was the sort of before the COVID period? What was the state of the label like at that stage?
I was super excited about it. 2019, like leading up into 2020. I mean, I had discovered that my business partner was not the person she made herself out to be for a long time. Leave it at that. I gave my trust, my complete trust, to somebody who did not deserve it. So we found a lot of, shall we say, inconsistency in her work product, and she was leaving the label. We were in the process of just trying to myself and the staff of just trying to get her to go away so we could just carry on. And I had the best staff I'd ever had. We had a whole lineup of records going into our 25th anniversary of new artists, of people that had been around for a while, like this great mix of new and old. And we were going to move into a new office space, and the staff just had all these great ideas, and it was really exciting. And then it just all blew apart.
Yes.
In astonishingly quickly.
Yes. God, that was.
It turns out people with more money for lawyers typically come out on top. So.
So how do you navigate the how was it for the next sort of couple of years
That was
dealing with?
terrible. I mean, it was just all lawyers and accountants, and somebody who refused to accept any responsibility for her actions. And so it just, as COVID ground on, artists and staff were like, we've got to move on. We got to do something. We don't know how this is going to end. And I was like, yeah, you got to go. And they were able to find other jobs or find other labels, and by that time I was just too burnt out to carry on. So it was
Yes.
a sputtering, tawdry little end.
God. So then, I mean, just looking at it, I mean, so when did you start thinking, I'll write the book? When did this project start to appear?
I started it before COVID, because people had been coming after me for years to do something, and it was just a matter of figuring out how I wanted to approach it. I didn't want to do a simple history of the label, because that seemed boring and
Yes.
limiting, and kind of exclusive. And it was in the isolation of COVID and watching the community that I had built not only being cut off from it, but from it being like dismantled before my very eyes, that I started to weave my biography into it and connect my first exposures to independent record stores and labels and all these underground bands, and how that affected me at the time, but also how it informed how I ran the label 20 years later. Right?
Yes.
All these things that I was all these lessons and ways of looking at the world that I was unwittingly absorbing as a teenager were completely instrumental in how I ran the label, and what I wanted the label to be, and how I wanted it to be. I always thought of us as kind of a community label. We
Yes.
were part of the fabric of the city. And when you're cut off from all these things that nourish you for all these years, you realize how important it is to have in your neighborhood the independent bookstore, the little record shop, the diner that's owned by a family, not just all chain stores. And so you just gotta. I wanted to like honor that and encourage people to support those kinds of things, and that was the way I was able to tie it all together. And I sent a couple of early drafts to a friend of mine who was an editor at a press, and I was like, is there anything here? And she said, this is amazing, like keep going. And then she would mark out big sections and be like, more of this, less of this. And so it was like, it was a three-year process. And the narrative changed obviously as when I started the thing, I was running a functioning label, and by the end it was gone. So it was like there were different aspects to this journey that kind of changed the entire, like all of a sudden entire chapters were pointless. So I would just yank them out, or I had to change verb tenses, and so it was tough, and it was cathartic, and it took way longer than it should have, but I think it's a lot better because of it.
Yes, my God. It's sort of, yes, I know I've been involved with a few things where you just think, God, unfortunately, things never seem to end that well unless you know when to jump before it all goes bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, and being a fan and casual historian of independent labels, you look back at the history of some of this stuff, and not many of them end well, because the thing is, I was a music fan first, not a business person, so I trusted this person to run the kind of the business side while I did the creative side, and that didn't turn out so well. I thought we shared a vision for the label, and I thought we shared like kind of a moral compass, and it turns out we didn't.
No.
And I don't know if she lost that along the way or if she never had it and it was just like a long con or whatever, but that's kind of irrelevant to what happened at the end. So
yes. So then do you then sell the whole label? Is it then sold and everything with it has been sold on?
Yeah, we had at that point I had no other choice. I was out of, I was just out of gas, like she just had more money for lawyers than I did, and it was like, okay, it's it's done. The staff was gone, and artists were jumping ship, and so it's like, what are we doing here? I don't have the energy to build this back up. So
yeah, my God, it's awful, isn't it? Really. So that was just
it's awful, but it was also completely unnecessary. she could have taken some money and walked away, and everyone would have been fine. But
yes, my God. So where does that leave you going forward then? Have you got any plans or any ideas of what happens once this autumn winter's kind of gone and we enter next year?
I don't really. I'm just seeing what's going to happen with this. It's been a process. It's been a lot harder than I thought it would be to get this out into the world. And for a couple of years, I just kind of sat and stared at a wall. I mean, I was just done. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't really do much. So I'm finding my sea legs again, and we'll see. I mean, I'm getting to talk to a lot of people about this book and write a lot of other things. So we'll see.
Yes, my God, it's well, thank you, ever so much for talking to me. And yes, it's been kind of fascinating. I've sort of, gone into bits and pieces of the book, but yes, I hope you get through this horrible bit.
I'm as bad as it was, as bad as it continues to be in some ways, and as awful and stupid and pointless and vile and vindictive and mendacious as this person was. I'm luckier than most. I got to do this for a living. I saw thousands of shows. I got to work with some of my heroes. I got to do something where, I run into people as I've been doing events for the book, and where people are like, thank you. Like I moved to Chicago because of this label, or I met my wife because of this label, or I did X, Y, and Z because of this label. I mean, the thing about music to me is what I really had a lot of time to think about was that music is just a continuum, and I got to be a part of that. And the label was a way for me to pay it back to people like Barrence Whitfield or Graham Parker or Dex Romweber or Andre Williams or all these heroes of mine that I got to work with. But it's also a way to pay it forward and like hopefully inspire someone as idiotic as me to start their own label.
Yes, because Barrence,
because independent music needs morons like us to just keep doing this, even though it's counterintuitive and there's so many easier ways to make money, and it's hard.
Was it quite a gamble with Barrence? Because this was him on the return trip, wasn't it? In the teen period of the this was
gamble for who?
Well, either of you. I mean, just if there was any interest or whether the record was going to be as good as you'd hoped it to be. I just wondered if there was.
Honestly, and I mean this absolutely 100%. I never thought about it. I heard the record. A friend of mine who put out their record before that, Shake It Records in Cincinnati, sent me the new one, the one that became Dig Thy Savage Soul in 2008. Sent it to me and said, "Hey, I don't have the money to put this out. Would you?" And I heard it, and halfway through the first song, I looked at my label manager, whose desk was like just out the door of my office, and I said, "We got to put this out." And that was it. I mean, I called Peter that week and we kind of hashed it out. I mean, that's one of those things that, when Rock and Roll Karma drops a Barrence Whitfield album in your lap that is that good, you don't let your brain get in the way. You just do it, And I had demos or album ideas by people from that era that I have their records, and they weren't very good, and those were awkward conversations.
Yes.
But this one I never thought about. I loved it, and I loved working with those guys.
Yes, well, yes, amazing.
And I got to come to London when they were on the Jules Holland show, and I got to go out to that studio and watch them with who was on that? The Pixies and Janelle Monáe and Tony Joe White and what's his face, Hugh Laurie, and then Barrence Whitfield. It was awesome.
God, that was a dream team, wasn't it? That was a dream team. Did you? I mean, I know this is a bit of a naff one, but I mean, if you were to pick, say, your 3 or say 5 favorite albums that you brought out on the label, what would they be?
Can't do it. Depends on the mood.
Depends.
I mean, there are who's your favorite child kind of thing.
Yes,
I can't do it. Because it depends on the mood, depends on so many things. I mean, what I love about the catalog for me, again, as a music nerd, is that I keep discovering things about it. It keeps giving. I was interviewed for, there's a book on Justin Townes Earle coming out next year, a biography, authorized biography. And I was interviewed quite a bit for that. And I found myself listening to his records to kind of get myself in that headspace, and I was getting completely different things. I was noticing little turns of phrase that I never got before, and I'm 10 years older, so I'm 10 years older and wiser. And there are obviously some records that hold up better than others, but I can honestly say I only think we put out 4 or 5 records that I find at this point in my life to be utterly without value. And I am not going to name them.
No, I know. It's like, no, I mean, obviously, yes, that would be, well, that's an amazing hit rate then. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And,
I mean,
you listen to some of the singer-songwriters, like somebody like Graham Parker or Corey Brannon or Justin, Robbie Fulks, like there's a depth to their writing. Sarah Shook, another one. Like there's a depth to their writing that as you move, as a fan, as you move through life, you're going to start picking out different things that just didn't mean anything to you before, or didn't mean the same thing. And so it's a catalog that just keeps giving if you're willing to listen to it. So it never gets mired in that kind of nostalgia where I'm like, well, here are my 5 favorite.
Yes. I know, and that was actually with Graham Parker. I do remember enjoying his, work in the very early days, and then sort of disappearing. But then there was that film, wasn't there, with Paul Rudd.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is 40.
This is 40, and it was just like,
Yeah.
God, that must have been brilliant for Graham and anybody, your label in a
Well,
way.
the director was a huge Graham Parker fan,
Yes.
so he wrote the part for him, I think.
And that was just amazing. I mean, that was just such a moment, wasn't it? I mean, yes, dear old Graham, he's doing well.
Yeah, I mean, so if you have a record that you love, say,
Yes.
and you listen to it now the same way you did 30 years ago when it came out, then you're kind of missing an opportunity, or you're kind of stuck in this mire of nostalgia, which is just kind of a creative dead end.
Yes.
So records should just keep speaking to you as you go through life too.
Yeah, and I also find that the seasons change my record mood as well. There's certain records that come out in the autumn, some can come out in the spring. It's just it's what you expect, really, isn't it? Some evoke a kind of romantic.
On a nice spring day, I'm not going to be pulling out my Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds records, but on a day like today, I might just very well.
Yes, I know, but no Jethro Tull.
No, never. There's no good day for Jethro Tull, as far as I'm concerned. No weather that is good for Jethro. Maybe if there's a wind so loud that I can't actually hear the Jethro Tull, then that would be okay.
That would be the day. That would be it. Well, thank you ever so much, Rob, for giving me the time for that. And if you want, I can always send you the link, and then you can always.
Oh yeah, this was a blast. Absolutely, send me the link, and I'll send it to the publisher, and I can also send you. When I'm done with this, the link that I have for UK stores.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, yes, definitely. That would be really good. Then I'll put it in the notes below, and that'll be perfect. That'll be great. Yeah. Okay,
this was fun. I mean, this is great. Getting to just talk, nerd out about music,
Well, absolutely. Look, best of luck and have a lovely evening. I'm going to go to bed now. But look, take care and all the best. And thanks again. Right. Take care.
No,
bye-bye.
Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Rob for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.